Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. It's a great pleasure today to welcome back to the briefing Danny Seaman. Danny, thank you so much for joining.
Moshe, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Danny, I love hearing your thoughts on what's happening in Israel and this war. So let's jump right into it. As you know, there's, of course, big news that the IDF now has a new chief of staff. Maybe you can share your thoughts on that.
The big day today is that finally the chief of staff, who was virtually basically responsible for the IDF failure, the tremendous failure on October 7th, he today was replaced. And the new chief of staff is Eyal Zamir. He actually comes from the Tank Corps after a long line of infantry commanders from the paratroopers, Golani. Now we are back to, it's been a generation since somebody from the Tank Corps. I think this is also indicative of the role that the Tank Corps has played in the recent year and a half. Anybody in the infantry can say how pleased they were when they had the tanks nearby and with them. So he's been appointed as the chief of staff today. I guess the essence of his speech can be down to the fact that he says that we struck a very severe blow to Hamas, but they haven't been totally defeated yet. And I think this sort of relays to the prime minister's. The prime minister last week at the ceremony of the conclusion of officers course and the officers cadet. He outlined what he sees to be the main goals for Israel in the next few months. And he stated the first thing is the total and absolute defeat of Hamas. And then he mentioned that Iran will not have nuclear weapons, that we will remain in areas in Lebanon, and that areas south of Damascus to the border with Israel will be demilitarized, and that Israel will be providing the defense and security of the Druze population in southern Syria. And also will be taking out the terrorist infrastructure in Judea and Samaria. So these are more or less are the goals and I guess you can say the orders for the new chief of staff. And for the Israeli public, they want to see a more offensive attitude on the part of the Israel IDF. The complaints by the public here and by many in the security establishment has been that the previous chief of staff was not decisive enough in his actions, and in a way ignored the direct orders that he was getting from the government. And so they're hoping that this new choice will be one to understand and realize his position, which is to fulfill the instructions of the government. And so let's wish him good luck, and hopefully he'll be able to correct and restore the trust of the Israeli public in the IDF.
Absolutely. And Danny, I'm wondering if you can just explain a little bit about how the leadership of the IDF works in the sense that it's not just run by one person. So now that there's a new chief of staff, how do you think that will trickle down into the lower ranks? You know, certainly the leadership of the IDF in changing culture and changing really the public's trust in the entire institution? I mean, is there an expectation that he's going to come in and clean up shop entirely, or just change the ethos of the leadership? Well, what do you think we can expect?
Well, I'm hoping, like many Israelis, that I'm not a military expert, but all I can say is that there was obviously a failure with the IDF. The reports that are coming out are a continuation of that problem that was existed in the IDF. That I can basically say was this concept, and there's a lot going on in Israel right now around this whole atmosphere of what happened before the 7th of October. The concern that there was a political motivation behind the behavior of the top echelon of the IDF together with the Shin Bet. The whole political culture in Israel was contaminated to a degree. Some people believe that the American administration had their fingerprints on this. the previous administration, and they were involved very much with the attempt to try to undermine Netanyahu and remove him from office. So all these things have to be addressed and be aired out, and that's what the public want here. They're not pleased with the reports that the IDF echelon has submitted up until now, because basically the complaints are that they address the technical aspects and not the greater views and attitudes of those leading the military. And it's no secret that the atmosphere and the attitude of the commander affects those in the IDF. Now, the public here will say there is no problem with the rank and file, those that were on the battlefield up until the level of colonels who are fighting in the battlefield. The problem comes with those are more tainted by politics, and it can be office politics if you want to put it in that frame of, you need to, that your advancement in the military will depend on the commanders that are above you. And unfortunately, this affects the military as well. So they're hoping that he'll bring in new attitude and project to the commanders below him what he wants and what the public in Israel want. So we can all hope for that. There's no doubt that in the battlefield itself, the Israeli soldiers and the commanders were above and beyond. This is, and we've said this before, this is our greatest generation who've risen to the occasion and understand what we're fighting for and what we're here for. They don't want politics tainting anything in the IDF and in the security apparatus in Israel. And they're willing to literally lay down their lives. But beyond that, most of our military consists of reservists, and reservists have to leave their families, leave their jobs. For here, it's been for sometimes between 150 to 300 days out of the past year and 4 months. And they realize, and we know we're going to be called upon again in the near future to finish up the job. So they're hoping that the command will understand what needs to be done and fulfill the instructions that it receives from the political echelon.
And I know that earlier on in the war, there was this great concern of changing up leadership in the midst of a war, that when you're fighting hard, to change the head of the army is risky because it interrupts, it disrupts a lot of the operations. So how does that work at this junction? Meaning you're suggesting, and everyone is suggesting, that that was true then, but now is the right time, and now, in fact, it will improve operations. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's look, nobody ever planned in Israel that we'd be engaged in a war beyond 30 days, 60 days at the most. This was also one of the warnings or one of the concerns in the security establishment in Israel that our wars have to be conducted very quickly. And I'm not even addressing the issue of international pressure against Israel. I'm talking about the most basic element of, do we have the human resources to do it for as long as we do? As I mentioned just before, you have the public that are leaving their lives behind and dedicating themselves totally to the military aspects. And you have independent business people who their jobs and businesses have suffered. You have all these aspects of it, but also weapons. How much, and we know that in the past year, it's not only the strategic weapons that the former administration were putting a stranglehold on Israel. Anybody in the field can tell you that we were having difficulties with bullets and shells for tanks and artillery. And these were not in enough abundance. So, and we've shown that in this over a year that we're engaged in battle, we've maintained that and been able and successful at this, which is another aspect of Israel that even our enemies weren't. It wasn't that they weren't aware of; they never thought that we could do this. So we've shown our abilities are beyond anything that anybody anticipated. But you need time to gather and let people go home and attain to their personal business and their private businesses, and give them this time to gather their forces and to rearm ourselves. And so this ceasefire came at a point which was beneficial to us also. And then not only for concentrating on trying to get as many hostages from the area out as possible. So the ceasefire itself was timely. It was important also for our attempt to release the hostages and do it in a way that it has damages for Israel. But look, this is a consequence of the loss we suffered on the first day. On October 7th, we lost. And as a result of that loss, hundreds of Israeli civilians were taken hostage. And we have to address that issue, and at times at a painful price. And that's what's happening now. But all in all, it makes sense what happened. And the prime minister is addressing this, and we're trying to extend it. Now, not so much to regroup and reorganize, but mostly to try to get as many of the citizens and the soldiers. Now, I don't believe there are any more live civilians being held. I believe right now that's anybody that they believe to have been a soldier. And we want to release as many as possible. So we're trying to extend it, and we're trying to apply pressures now that are not military, but the aid that was, the humanitarian aid that was being allowed to be in, we put a stop to that at the moment, making it very clear to them that we expect in return for that they will also make concessions. And probably next will be electricity and power into Gaza, and send them a message that if they want Israel to consider that, right now they believe that they can apply and there'll be international pressure. It's not going to work. Not only because the American administration is on our side, but also because the public in Israel are fed up, and they're putting pressure on the government of Israel to do everything that's necessary to try to get the hostages released, but also put an end to the Hamas government and leadership in Gaza.
For sure. Now, in other news, very tragically, there was a death from the lady who was the victim of the terrorist attack the other week in Pardes Chana. Maybe you can share a little bit about what you know with our viewers, where the terrorist came from, and what that means for this war.
Well, the terrorism that we've been that's increased in the past few weeks. 2 weeks ago, we had this incident on Thursday that was targeted for the next Friday morning, when they were supposed to detonate 5 bombs on trains, and there were supposed to be a number of suicide bombers. Also, right now, the investigation is ongoing onto this and who is behind it, and try to identify all those who were involved. So you had that, which was very fortunate on our part that they didn't succeed. Yeah, then last week you had the car ramming in which there were several injured, one severely. This young woman named Yaheli Gur, who passed away today. I believe she was 14 years old, and that's a consequence of the terror. That this terrorist was an illegal Arab from Judea and Samaria who was employed inside of Israel. One of the reasons many Israelis are not comfortable anymore with Arabs from Judea and Samaria working inside of Israel and finding employment in Israel, because we know that at some point or another, they can engage and are more than willing to engage in terrorism against us. It's also encouraged by the Palestinian Authority, who continues not only in their textbooks and in their media and in their mosques, but they also pay any person who's involved in terrorism against Israel. They pay the family, they pay them. If they're in prison, they're paying for those who participated in the October 7th assault against Israel, and they're paying their families. And this was Hamas, and supposedly the PA is not Hamas, but they're paying these terrorists. So that encourages them to continue in this, and they see that. So that's why Israel, now this is not new, this has been going on for quite a while. This same PA, that there are those elements. The Egyptians now came out with their own suggestion of what to do in the day after, but there are those who believe that the PA should be responsible for Gaza. They can't even control the areas. They are running right now under the Oslo agreements in Judea and Samaria and the Arab towns and villages there, where terrorism is blossoming, and they have they're building the terrorist bases and infrastructure in Tulkarem, in Jenin, in Kalkilia. Israel is engaged in these areas in the past few weeks in intensive battles to undermine and to remove the terrorist elements in these areas which pose a threat to Israel, and will continue to do it there as well.
You know, Dana, there's always discussion about reforming the Palestinian Authority. That if we can just get them to change certain policies, get rid of pay to slay, finally there will be a partner for peace. What are your thoughts on that? Is it possible to reform the Palestinian Authority, or must it just be dismantled entirely?
That's a Western concept that has no validity, and it's absolute nonsense. And it's the way, just like the Syrian leader, the Syrian ISIS leader who took over Syria now and has proclaimed himself president, not dictator, he's president. But just as he's turned to wear a suit and trimmed his beard down to make it more impressionable upon the Western societies that he's more moderate, this kind of nonsense has been going on with the PLO, which is a terrorist organization, since the Oslo agreements. And you have to realize they are playing us. It's the greatest charade, the greatest scam in Western society is the whole, first, the whole concept of Palestinians, but the PLO is this charade of trying to pay. So there's no reform there. It doesn't exist, especially not if you're talking about an Islamic society, and that's what they are. Why are they not having elections in the Palestinian Authority with the PLO? Because when Arabs elect, they go with the most extreme element. That is Islam. And that to them is what Hamas, and they go to the religious extreme. That's what Hamas presents for them. So believing now that any attempt in using Western terminology to try to legitimize what is happening in the Arab Palestinian society in Judea and Samaria, it's absolute nonsense. We fell for that. It's over with. October 7th told us exactly what we're dealing with. They never hid their intentions before October 7th. They don't hide their intentions today either. We listen to what they are saying, not to what we want to believe, but to what they are saying. They seek the destruction for Israel. And all you have to do, don't listen to me. Listen to their demonstrations in the United States, not here, to what they're saying, they and their Marxist supporters in the American universities, and what they're saying very clearly, from the river to the sea. For that, what they mean, even if they don't know which river and what sea they're talking about, they understand that they're talking about the entire territory in which the state of Israel resides. They want to eliminate us. We've had enough with that nonsense, and we're fortunate enough to have a president of the United States who understands this as well, and said that everything that we've tried and tried again in the past has failed. You don't go back to that. And just to finalize this, just saying that for years, I've been working on part of Israel public diplomacy for the past 40 years. Back in the 80s, how often did they tell us, if you recognize the PLO, there'll be peace. If you cede territory, there'll be peace. We did both of these things. We recognized the PLO. We ceded territory. They told us the PLO is the only legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. Well, we signed an agreement with them, and suddenly the Hamas pops up. And we ceded territory. That's never enough for them, because it's not the goal. It's not Palestinian nationhood. It's the destruction of Israel that we're dealing with, and we're no longer going to fall for that charade.
Danny, I want to ask you a hard question, but you're a smart man, so I know you can take it. You know, after October 7th, there was kind of this lockdown, and Arabs from Judea and Samaria were not given permission to work in Israeli towns. So, for example, in Beit Shemesh, if you needed a contractor to build anything in your house, fix anything, it was very hard to find any skilled labor. And now Israel has returned to the pre-October 7th world of allowing them to come in and to work. And as a result, then there's an increase in terror incidents. So what is the balance? Because Israel has built itself on a somewhat of an economy of bringing in Arabs at cheaper labor rates, but it opens us up to terror incidents. So how do we move forward?
Just remind me how many Japanese worked in America. I'm not talking about Americans of Japanese descent. How many Japanese worked in the United States during World War II? How many Germans worked in America in the United States during World War II? How many Vietnamese were employed by Americans? How many Iraqis were employed during the Iraq War? No country employs its enemy. And that's how ridiculous this whole situation here is. Because part of that is that concept, believing that if we make their lives better, if we allow them to have wealth, to be employed, why aren't they why, it's absolutely, that's part of how all of this is ridiculous. I just remind you that Kuwait, for example, employed a lot of Palestinians in their area before the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. And the moment Iraq, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, they joined the Iraqis against the Kuwaitis who were employing them. So you have to look at not what we want to do, but what they're calling. And now over 80% of Arabs in Judea and Samaria have said they approve of October 7th. If they could, they would repeat October 7th. To them, it's a huge victory. So we have to listen to that and understand that the lives of our children are more important than how many Palestinians have a job in Israel. And for the state of Israel itself, there are other alternatives. We have good relations with India. We have good relations with the Philippines. We have good relations with China. We have good relations with other countries that have the option of providing cheap labor and sending them here and engaging them in working inside the state of Israel. And until such time as the Arabs want to live with us and not take advantage of anything we do with them to kill us, they shouldn't be employed in Israel. As simple as that.
These briefings are obviously not, economics, but a lot of our viewers are writing in. Why don't we just change the workforce in Israel and have Israelis start doing these jobs? And it's obviously a point very well taken.
No, absolutely. I'm not denying that. That's an option. But sometimes you have a society that it's Western and modern and more focused on other things. And Israel is one of those societies. And unfortunately, we don't have the benefit of allowing those who are willing to do the cheap labor, because one of the things they'll be more than happy to do is take advantage of that and murder us. So we can't continue doing that.
Danny, we just have a few minutes left, and we began our discussion today talking about how the new chief of staff can reform, the culture and the faith in the army here in Israel. And I'm wondering, without getting too political, what your thoughts are on Israeli society having confidence in our political leadership. Again, not getting into parties here or there. To what extent are the people of Israel right now kind of committed to the Zionist project and belief that we can really be victorious in this war at large?
No, the Israeli public have no doubt about that. And then this, you're touching upon something that a lot of people get abroad that don't understand the essence of it here. There is a battle inside of Israel, an ideological, it's not even a debate anymore. It's beyond a debate. It's actually a struggle between those who want to have a secular Israel and those who believe that Israel is a Jewish state first and foremost. We're here because we are the Jewish people who have returned. And, I say it's ironic, but the roots of the state of Israel were created through the Zionist movement, which came from socialism and Jews who joined the socialist movement. But what is ironic about it is that a lot of these people, they grew up in shtetls in East Europe, and they had religious upbringing. A lot of them were far more knowledgeable about the religious roots of the state of the Jewish people and the state of Israel than many of them who carry on the socialist, Marxist tendencies today. But why is it ironic? Because I don't believe that the Jews who were very religious could have created or returned to the state of Israel because they were waiting for a messianic. I'm being very simplistic in my explanation to give a framework of what we were dealing with. You needed these people who left the Orthodox Judaism to have that movement because it was part of the movement throughout Europe in the mid-19th century, the Spring of Nations. So the Jews believed when you had this movement of nationalism in Europe, Jews believed that they had the national right to return to the land of Israel. But since then, those Jews who were waiting for the call of the return of the Jewish people came here on groups. Many of them were expelled from Arab countries. A lot of these are Eastern Jews from Asian and North African and Arab countries. And they brought with them this strong belief in Judaism. And this has been the stronghold for many Jews. Now, without going in depth with this, I'll simply look at our soldiers, look at what is important to them. Many of them, and they're grateful to a lot of the people joining us here today who sent in and helped purchase a lot of military equipment. But after the military, the helmets and the vests, the one thing that soldiers were very, very supportive of were getting the tzitziot. And our military is still majority secular. And yet the religious aspects of it, and I can speak for myself, say there are no atheists in the battlefield. To me, Shema Israel was the most important thing I could say and repeat when I was in battle at that time. So today, the tzitziot, a lot of soldiers felt very connected to that. And the state of Israel is very, and the people of Israel are very strong in their Jewish identity, their Jewish religion, and want that to be perpetuated inside the state of Israel. And with all due respect to those, nobody's imposing religion on anybody here in Israel. The only ones who are trying to impose their opinions are secular socialist Israelis who believe that they can twist our arms into forgetting who we are and why we're here in the first place. And it's failed. It's not going to fail. It's already failed. And the media picks it up because they side with those people. Listen, with all due respect to them, we know what we're here for. We know who we are. We know we're the Jewish people. And there are two things that October 7th strengthened among us. One is Am Yisrael Chai, and the other thing is very simply never again. And that's what we are here for in the state of Israel, which allows us to make sure we can be hit, we can be struck by our enemies, but we'll never allow them. We'll never be helpless and defenseless against them again.
Amen. Danny Seaman, thank you so much for sharing that, for inspiring us and educating us. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m.
Moshe,
Eastern
if I can
Time.
just
Please.
suggest that if they want to see the spirit of Israel, Sheba Hospital, their recuperation center, had for the entrance of the month of Adar, they had the soldiers who were being treated, hundreds of soldiers who were going through the rehabilitation in Sheba Hospital were receiving the month of Adar, the Jewish month, and in great prayer. And check that out, that video. It's wonderful to see.
Okay, everyone, you heard it from Danny. You gotta Google what are they looking for? Sheba Hospital Chodesh Adar?
Chodesh Adar, it's wonderful.
Okay, everyone should go check that out to see the spirit in the Sheba Hospital, and it's not just in Sheba. I know Shaare Zedek
Right,
also, which I
right.
guess is a religious hospital, but it's a big thing in hospitals. People are asking for the links. I don't have any links right now, so I guess
I'll
you
try
should
to find
Google
it
it.
for you and give it to you.
There you go. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining this briefing. We'll be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.